that drives you. I tell people I work every night on my laptop with a movie and I review my audit files because I love what I do. And when I'm doing that, I get excitement. Actually, the more I work, the more I want to stay up working, and if I was sleepy, then the sleep just starts running away. So now what happens is, so you find people that are working at school, people working in hospitals, people working wherever, and that's not what they want to do. So many Namibians despise their jobs. They actually hate their jobs. So, no, really. There's a lot of Namibians. I'm sure if you do statistics, you will find a number of Namibians that hate their jobs. How can you be productive if you hate your job? And then you say, please then go. No, I have nowhere else to go. So they're doing it because they have nowhere else to go. Now, I don't know how to solve that problem. So, but the one we can look about, then let's talk about government wage bill. So now I cannot just list problems anymore because then the president says, well, you are on the high-level panel. What should I do
What are
about
the
it?
solutions?
So I must be careful. So what you look at it, you tell, okay, government wage bill is too high. Release some people. Okay, Nangula, my unemployment is already dead. If I release these people, what are they going to be doing? Let me think about that, and I'll come back to you. And then you don't go back. So we need to understand that to some extent, government believes they is solving a problem that we have all failed to solve. The private sector is supposed to create jobs, and we have failed to create jobs. And maybe it's not our job, and we think government did not create a conducive environment, and that's why. And this blame shifting will go on forever. So that's why probably I go to public-private partnerships. And I started studying in 2015, and my topic on the master's was constraints to implementing PPPs in Namibia. And what I was thinking is, why does government behave in a certain manner? And then why does the private sector behave in a certain manner? If we can just have a conversation and say, government, you are regulating this. Please, may I understand? You are employing too many people. May I understand? Private sector, you are not giving your fair share. Why? So, because many times what we're dealing with each other is, you make a move, then I make her, and I anticipate yours, and we are playing chess with each other. And I'm not so sure if we will solve the problem. So at some point, we kind of have to come to each other with open cards and say, we want this to work. How can we collaborate better? Me as government, my job is not to create jobs. My job is to create a conducive environment. You are there to create jobs. What can I do to help the environment be more conducive? And then the private sector said, okay, government, why are you creating more laws? Well, because you are just busy stealing all the time and you are greedy and you're not. And then you say, okay, so what can you do not to be greedy or whatever? And that is the conversation that we need to have with each other. Why do we have NIF? Because we have failed. Government didn't just wake up one day and say, how do I annoy business people today? No, government woke up and they have got a problem on their hand. And according to them, NIF is the solution. So the point is, please come to them with an alternative solution and tell them this is not the way. But don't just tell them this is not the way because they have a problem to solve. And until we have those dialogues where we listen to each other and we put the problem on the table and start addressing real sensitive issues, I think we will keep being at this one and sharing views.
And I think that the question still stands in as far as the PPPs are concerned. I think that we know that, yes, we need to come together and we need to have a conversation. Government says, okay, here's an act. Private sector says, we're not happy with this act. Right now, the act itself is being reviewed. I think the bigger question is in terms of what's happening right now, whether it's the reviewing of the act or all the other that issues that are and actions that are being taken. Are they really speaking to the outcomes that we want, both as private and public sector? Just move on that as a throw it back to the floor. Can we have 3 questions? I know there was a hand there as well. I know that hand was there, but we had two of them there at the back. That one here and this one. Then we'll give it to him, and then we'll come back to you as well. But can we give that gentleman the first chance, please? Because he's been waiting for quite some time too.
No, I've been asking a long time.
Yeah.
The mic is here.
Making progress, and I will give you my feedback. So let us not be negative and attack government and attack the private sector, because in my experience, I think we are making progress. But I can give the views on that.
Good evening. I'm from UNAM. I just wanted to ask few things like some are comments, some are questions now. You are talking about small, medium enterprises, how to basically improve them. For that purpose only, there was a bank that was established, okay, and then it was shut down. It went bankrupt, yeah. So the point is now, we are not asking, there were actually systems that was put in place in order to help small, medium enterprises. But what happened? We have unethical, immoral, characterless people in positions, right? So we are not able to change that one. If you want to improve your country, you need to have the basic ethics. I cannot do certain things because if I take $1 million, allow this project to happen, it's going to eat up my country for $100 million and next 13 years or 20 years, and my next generation is going to be affected. We do not worry about those things. That is the kind of people we are having in positions, in places. And the next thing I wanted to say this thing now, I've been in this country quite some time now. So there are a lot of young Namibians here, they have the entrepreneurial potential. I'm working at UNAM now. Now the students come with a packet of sweets, they are selling it as like a part-time. I encourage them, I just buy every day $5 sweets, okay? Bad for my health, doesn't matter. But the point is, these people need some kind of capital. When they go, so I have some plan, I have to go and ask somebody, who are they going to ask now? So now you had the SME bank and you are all eating money. I was reading that where are the loans that was given? The loans were given to all these big corporates, big companies. They were the one taking the loans now. What is the purpose of having an SME? So I basically mean to say people must have basic ethics. Otherwise, your economy will go down even further. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. You can go ahead.
Is it on? Yes. Hi, my name is Tian from the Stock Exchange. Part of the discussion we just had was around the wage bill, but it's actually, in my experience, somewhat more than that. Government's exposure to the economy is massive, mostly through its state-owned enterprises, more than just its direct role. And as much as public-private partnerships have been on the discussion for some time now, I've been talking about privatization for quite some time. I've been told many times to stop saying that, but I won't. At least we're at the point where we're doing it on MTC. MTC is the best example where we actually had a public-private partnership. It was extremely successful. So now if we start looking at some of the areas where government is directly involved in our economy, where private sector is also involved and probably doing a better job than government is, we need to get to the point where we are willing to then say that government can start exiting those areas where private business has already been established for a very long time. If I look at the tourism sector, there's obvious potential there to very quickly and expeditiously do PPP. The risk and the fear from government is that everybody working there is going to get fired. Now again, our Competition Act is in a position to actually deal with that people can't just be fired so quickly and so easily. Our labor law is there for that as well. But this isn't being pushed on a clear level that government is going to take that first step. We can't just look for PPPs in all the new businesses that we're looking at doing. We need to prove that we can do that on the existing ones.
Thank you. Yeah, the gentleman there at the back has been waiting for quite some time, and then
Sorry.
Can we give it to him? We can't keep on hijacking that microphone.
Oh, okay.
Can somebody take control of that rogue microphone? Can we? It's not the parliament. Can we have order in the house?
Thank you. Evening, everyone. My name is Lange.
Please edit that out. Ne?
I'm a struggling entrepreneur, as Roland rightfully mentioned. I think Roland touched on something very well in terms of highlighting what is obviously shared amongst young entrepreneurs in the country, especially of a previous disadvantaged background, and then also talking about increasing the revenue line and obviously getting out what is the residual, the profits, and then the complications that come in between of managing costs and whatnot. So I think you did well to highlight that, but I wanted to ask a question to the members of the high-level economic panel as to sort of what is being looked at, to address that very, I don't think I caught that in terms of what is being looked at to address that very pressing concern in terms of unleashing the SME. We did well to highlight the problems, but guys are obviously in a privileged position of influence or something of the sort to help shed some light as to what is being done to tackle that specific concern with unleashing the SMMEs and helping them manage some of the hidden costs. For example, cost of capital. You get a loan from DBN, they want to look at charging you 13, 14% interest, which obviously eats into your profits and eventually allows you to close your doors. So yeah, I'd appreciate some guidance on that.
All right. Madam, you can have your contribution before we bring it back to the panel.
Hi, sorry, Natalia. I think something that is least talked about is accountability by these big companies and whatnot. So UNAM per se has this bill of like 4 million. I'm not sure if it's for water or electricity, but it clearly means that somebody has been chowing the money from somewhere. So what can we do about that? Especially in government, we have so much losses where people just take this money and you do not hear that the person has been fired or whatever happened to the person. So I think when we start to, in government per se, for government people to take accountability for their actions and maybe let them be dismissed or whatever, I think that allows for kind of like fear to grow so that people are more wary of what they do. And also, I wanted to talk about, maybe last question, but last point, but we are here, we're talking about this and we talked about that, but then what then, you know? Like he said, the NIAF thing was in 2016. What has happened then? If people can actually create these platforms for people to talk, and they also create platforms where they can actually take action. Maybe there are people in this room who can be able to contribute to the better of the economy, but you're not just giving them the platform to kind of contribute in the way they should. Thank you.
Important one. High-level panel. I think SMEs. Let's start there. I think that's a good one. SMEs, unleashing SMEs. What is exactly happening? I think perhaps a good departure point would also be looking at some of the policy pronouncements from the summit, the construction council, and a number of others to make it easier for SMEs to enter these markets.
Thanks for the guidance there, Ricardo, because there's a multitude of answers in terms of the SME sector and creating those supportive mechanisms to help our SMEs grow from a funding perspective, cost of capital that is right, but also from a mentorship perspective. Because we've had a lot of trial and error. Trial and error should be embraced, but sometimes it has led to the closure of some of the businesses. Now, the situation with the SMEs is very unique, especially in our current environment. There are many challenges that we are all aware of. You've got corruption, for example, which is also a challenge that sometimes sits there and impedes on the growth of SMEs. But I want us to recognize that Namibia is a dual economy. And often and I was saying this earlier, that we've got the informal sector and we've got the formal sector. And SMEs fall within the formal sector. The gentleman from UNAM earlier who was talking about the street vendors outside UNAM is talking about obviously the informal sector. But there needs to be a national acknowledgement that there is an informal sector. Who am I talking about? I'm talking about the graduate, the student that comes out of a TVET. When that student comes out of TVET, they don't have the collateral to be able to access finance necessarily. But they go and plow their trade, whether it's fixing a vehicle or whether it's carpentry and so on, within the informal sector. You know, your construction sector, again, you've got your formal contractors who subcontract to your informal sector. So this is an area that we need to recognize, because in all policy pronouncements and so forth, the word informal sector is simply almost not there. And until we start to recognize it, we'll be able to create initiatives that will allow that sector to also graduate into the SME sector, where answers are plenty. Roland is able to assist further in that one. The other issue that I think is perhaps a growing theme around what most of the audience was saying is really deals with public sector mindset, a shift in the mindset of the public sector. Civil servants need to understand that they are servants of the people. We have a very big responsibility to reverse the notion that was there during apartheid, where services to the majority of the people were kept away. So reversing that notion means that you become a servant of the people, but yet there must be accountability. So we've got very good performance agreements in place. We've got public officers act in place that is able to give consequences for non-performance and so on. However, we find a situation where I guess it's a sense of entitlement, or if it's a sense of not the supervisors not holding those that should do their job to account. And it's a serious issue, but maybe to be discussed further. So on the one end, government has put together the environment from a regulatory and policy perspective in terms of public sector and so forth. But again, consequences are something we need to address.
Accountability, Nangula, please.
Okay, so maybe accountability and on the SME point, but then also just to discuss on the point of 10 on PPP. I agree with you. I think government is not business. Government does not necessarily know how to run a business, and government should stay out of business so that business people can do business. But at the same time, we do know that there are business people that have failed us. So normally I am not a good person because I kind of tend to try and balance people, and then one thinks I side with the other. But what is important is there is a reason why sometimes government hold on to, and we need to convince them to say, it's okay, you can let go. Really, it's in safe hands now. And I think that's what government is concerned about. We tried SME Bank, and we gave to what have you. And yes, maybe we have done our part, and whatever. Is the next person we are going to give to the same as the ones that we gave SME Bank? So we need to get trusted people that work with government so that we can convince government it's all right. This is the right person. And the right person normally is what is difficult to get the right person for government to release. That is what we need to work on, building trust little by little, project by project. So if you look at in the PPPs, and especially in tourism, government has worked with the private sector in 1 or 2 cases to try and do PPPs. And then government, and sometimes I say people that work for government, either they don't know how to contract or they hate government. Because many times all contracts are just in favor of the other part and government benefits less. So then government feels, we don't know how to contract, let's rather not enter into contracts. Let's just continue the way we're doing. So how can we help to make sure that if I contract with government, I contract in good faith. And if they don't understand what they are, I put the card right and not necessarily to enrich myself. So there's a lot to consider there. And I think as private sector, we do have to give government credit sometimes to the fact that there's areas where our fellow private sector people have failed. But then yes, we look on the other side of saying government, normally the other person who fails government has got something, it's a human being with something to gain. So there's a lot to consider there, but the bottom line is we need to privatize, we need PPPs, and we need to find out how can we work to build trust, because lack of trust is what is giving us these challenges to some extent. When it goes, for example, looking at SMEs, solutions for SMEs is not one size fits all. So we cannot come and say, ooh, SMEs, we have got a solution for you. So I will tell you kind of like, let's talk about the 2 sectors. The agriculture that we're talking about. Maybe they want financing, but sometimes what they want is SME in agriculture is saying, it's all right, I can get ABCD, please give me market access. The one in poultry industry is saying, it's okay, don't give me whatever, please just close the border so that I do not compete with old, how many days old chicken from Brazil. The other one says, I want to start an SME, but please, I need money. So it's different industry by industry. And that's why, unfortunately, we were appointed in April. You could not come up today with a solution and say, here we have got the answer. But of course, we would like to engage people to come and talk to us. Now, what have we done, for example, at the summit, is really to look at some of the ideas on, say, what do we believe are the low-hanging fruit? Some of the low-hanging fruit is regulation. Yes, we need to look at some regulation, and we need to make sure that we build confidence in our economy. There is, for example, they're talking about the Africa Free Trade Area. Africa Free Trade Area means an entity in Africa has got open market to about close to 1 billion people. So when somebody comes to Namibia and produce in Namibia, they don't need to produce for Namibia, because why do we sometimes not attract investment? Because we are 2 million people. If you come and produce here, we know production costs are high, you cannot sell to 2 million people and get your return. You need to sell to more people. So now, if we are the best country in Africa, location, and talk about everything else, regulation, peace, and stability, and everything else, but we lack market. Now we have got, all of a sudden, got access to 1 billion people. What message do we have to take to investors who can quickly create 6,000 jobs here, 7,000 jobs there, how many thousand jobs there, so that we can service the rest of Africa? So yes, we do need, and that one is not only dealing with direct jobs, that will also help, because for SME to thrive, you cannot just thrive without having also a formalized business community, because SMEs will be starting to produce and deliver to those entities. So yes, there's a lot to do, but at this stage we want to say, how do we build confidence in our economy? How can we track those large customers for not only Namibia but for Africa, and that will help us also support the SME. So yes, there's a lot of things to do there, but I think I told you that I believe there's hope. The hope that I see is the engagements that we have had as the high-level panel with government, we feel welcome and we feel listened to. With the private sector, we feel welcome and we feel listened to. And I believe that is a good starting point. Government has listened to us. We had a summit. The president has made a number of announcements from what we have recommended to him. Ministry of Home Affairs, already they have had a session to talk about what they can do with regard. But then we cannot have xenophobia in Namibia if we need to grow this economy. We cannot afford it. I think that's it's not to say people are coming to take away our jobs. Yes, we need to make sure that somebody cannot come and do something that we are that we are equipped to do. But at the same time, we do need other people to help us to deliver what we need to deliver.
I think before Roland comes in, I think it's also important just to point out that many a times when we have this sort of conversations, I feel like since I've hosted so many platforms and sat on so many of them, the conversation is hot on the day. The moment we step out, it sort of seems to die out. So I would just also like to implore you right now, especially on the policy pronouncements. There's something huge like like a National Construction Council, for example, which was pivotal in the policy pronouncements that were made at the summit on the 1st of August. The reason why I'm pointing this out is literally it's a cabinet directive. The decision was already taken at cabinet. It was just announced at the summit. But we don't seem to be talking about it. It's not on the agenda of the media houses. It's not the mainstream economy. Nobody's talking about it. So please visit the site. It's economicsummit.com.na and access all the policy pronouncements. Take a look at those, and let's see how we can also engage on some of the issues that were pronounced that really became cabinet directives. Even like the 25% mandatory being scraped off and saying let's reevaluate that and see only for those that are engaging in public procurement how perhaps we can involve them. No conversation happening on that. So please visit the website, get the document, and let's continue to engage on social media platforms as well. But Roland, coming back to you, I think this issue around the PPP, what Tian has raised is a very, very important one. Just zoom in on that a little bit, particularly the balance of government staying out of business, but of course also the other socio-political challenge of inequality in the country, and bringing those together under the umbrella of inclusive growth, as I've mentioned in the beginning.
Okay, so I think I just want to make two very brief points before I try and address that. So the first one, to Lange's point, is I think that we also have a kind of negative cycle when it comes to the cost of capital here. So we have like relatively high failure rates in small businesses particularly, and I think higher than in many other places. The small business failure rates tend to be high anyway, but I think it's higher than in many other places, and a lot of that links to what I was talking about previously, some of the challenges with regards to doing business. So higher rates of failure mean that, you know, the owners of capital price for that. They make it a bit more expensive for you to borrow, and you get into this negative cycle, which means, you know, it's expensive to borrow, and that increases your failure rate. So that is definitely something that we need to look at. The accountability point, I think, is a interesting one, and it links to a lot of the challenges that we face. Like, how do we get the most out of our civil service wage bill if we don't have good accountability structures? Because one person, you know, you might have you might have 104,999 people working in government trying to do the right thing, but one person without accountability can do a lot of derailing of that. So that accountability is critical, and really introducing that accountability is a leadership issue. And I think that that's something that we need to face as a country, right? Being unpopular is sometimes the right thing to do. So yeah, I think that just on accountability, that's a kind of key point. The other thing that I think is interesting, the SME bank saga is very unpleasant, and it gets a lot of media attention, as it should. I think there were potentially regulatory problems around it. There's definitely sort of accountability problems after the fact. And are we truly going to take the full course of action that we can take under the law against the people involved? And that's a critical question. But at the same time, for SME bank failure, we also have DBN, which has been, I think, a pretty good success for the most part. Obviously, like any bank, it has its issues, it has its challenges, and similar. But it is actually not a story of failure. In fact, I think it's a story of reasonable success. When it comes to the idea of PPPs, I think that PPPs are part of the solution part of the solution to the funding challenges and the operating challenges and so on that